Greetings, this is the Questing GM for RPG Day 2020 and today is day 28 for the word close. So we are close to the end of RPG Day 2020 and that's probably what every other person who's doing RPG Day videos would say. So let's not talk about ending this too quickly because we still have a few days worth more to squeeze in for RPG Day 2020. So what else can we talk about close? The fear of the closed door, the excitement of knowing what's behind closed doors, and figuring a way out around the closed door, and all the techniques and traps that are found on closed doors. Yeah, that's probably that's probably the easy way out to talk about this topic. Maybe it's a little bit more heavy, and maybe can spark different kinds of discussion. Is are we as a hobby, role playing games, are we closed? Are we closed from letting people in? It's an explosive topic, let's just say. There are obviously very different takes on it. It may have been very close in the earlier days because maybe there was a lot of weird associations to it, spiritual otherwise, social otherwise as well. Uh, and there was this sense of only a few knew about it, only a few were let in because there was a matter of trust, of not being ridiculed, and all the other social stigmas that are associated with it. It did feel that way, in my earlier days, that we were a close bunch. That the very rare few players that I had, we were a very close bunch. Uh, Closed as in past tense, but at the same time, because of that relationship, it made us very close. As in a relationship, we were quite tight knitted. We looked out for each other in some ways. We only had those few people that we can trust, because if we can expose ourselves playing a strange character in strange voices, then there's not a lot to hide from those people. So I've stayed close with people that I've played, many years ago. Some of them still play, some of them don't. But I think that special connection that we had from playing this closed hobby back in the days made us close. It was a good part of what made us close, because spending hours over years playing a strange hobby was probably going to do that. Nowadays, you could say that, especially in the context of D&D, RPGs are now very wide open. It's becoming more inclusive. It's becoming more diverse. And that's another topic that I don't want to bring into the RPG a day video. But those are some observations you can definitely make. The inviting nature of role-playing games, and especially in D&D, has also exposed or revealed how close some groups are, some players are, some mindsets are, some play styles are, some ideologies are, in regards to accepting the other in some ways. And I'm not trying to pin this down to a particular group. I think it applies to every group. It spans all across different kinds of political spectrums in the role-playing game nowadays. uh, just turn on your RPG Twitter feed, and yeah, you can probably see how really close we are. Then actually, then despite how open space the hobby really is. So I'm not exactly sure if that's entirely something that is unhealthy. I think it's part of the nature of the beast, in a sense that, speaking from my experience, that because we only play role-playing games that to people that we're close with, therefore it's only natural that we are only going to associate ourselves with people who have very similar, let's say, lifestyle. Let's just put it simply as lifestyle, beliefs, uh, uh, status, social standings, all that sort of thing. Let's just lump it all together, lifestyle. When we are only close to certain kinds of people, it creates an echo chamber, and therefore we are closed to other forms of, other groups of people. and other lifestyles as well. As much as I like to see like every player being able to get along, and there was this idea way back, and I'm not sure if it's still something that's accepted very strongly, is the social geek fallacy. And that one of the ideas is that people who share the same hobbies don't necessarily have similar interests or can get along automatically, or it's not an assumed thing that just because I play D&D, you play D&D, we can automatically get along. And I think that's quite true. Just seeing how divided the D&D community is. I'm not making this up. At least I can see it for myself that it's a very divided community. And both both sides, wherever on whatever argument is, tend to be close to each other, saying that you're wrong, I'm right, and the other saying the same thing, you're wrong, I'm right. So nobody's really having dialogue, and either they are close-minded from each other, or they just want to keep things closed. Your thinking, your philosophies doesn't have to influence my play style, and I'm certainly someone who thinks that things that happen in the community doesn't necessarily have to reflect on my games, unless I think it's important to myself and my players. But if it's not relevant to my group, then I'll close it off. I'm not ashamed to say that. Where does this whole thing lead us to, in terms of the wider hobby? I think in a way I kind of accept that being closed is sort of part of the hobby. In fact, I would go a little as far as saying that it's kind of necessary to be closed. Coming back to my point, you have to be closed to be close with the people that you're playing with, to some degree. Although my intentions hopefully is not to be too closed from everything. I try to be an adaptable GM, who can welcome any kind of player into my table. But as a human being, who has a certain lifestyle that he would like to maintain, and I believe others will have their own lifestyle they would like to maintain as well. You have to be closed to certain things at certain points. But I think if there's a more honorable way of being closed to things, to different types of people, different types of lifestyles, it's not to use the reasons for why you're close to something as the basis for attack. I think being defensive is fine, but I think you shouldn't justify being closed against something to say that something is bad, that it shouldn't be in games, it shouldn't be in the RPG is so open, so diverse. It's only limited by the people who play it. There is no overarching concept or ideology that should infect everyone else, that everyone should be homogenized to a certain play style. Everyone can be allowed to be closed to certain things, because they just want to keep things close. So I don't know if this is something that's not really making sense. I am showing some of my own personal preferences and biases when that's part of being close to certain things. I think I'm trying not to be too close to everything. I give certain things a chance. I listen, and then I reevaluate if that's something I should be closed against. I've definitely been closed out by many things in the role-playing game hobby, by communities as well. It's sometimes sad, it's sometimes disappointing, but at the same time, I think whatever community has closed me out wouldn't benefit from me having it in the first place. Let bygones be bygones in some ways, I think. And I much rather be closed up from something rather than not allowing that thing to even exist in the first place, because to each their own. Everyone has their own boats to sail. Maybe until the day that we can actually have unexplosive dialogue about role-playing games. And I'm certainly hoping that RPG a Day is one of those movements that allows us to have dialogues and conversations across closed groups, across closed ways of thinking about role-playing games. is one way that we can try to, you know, chip on the closeness of the hobby as a whole, and, you know, between groups and between different people, because like I said, we need to be close to play role-playing games. This is probably bringing a close to my thoughts on close for RPG A Day 2020, day 28. And I'll see you in the next few more videos to the end, to the close of RPG A Day 2020.